Good afternoon, everybody. It's Beef Wellington here with the Career Compass once again, and today we're going to be teaching a class about cold calling and door knocking. Now, if you're familiar with the Career Compass, you're probably thinking to yourself, why are we teaching this class? Because in our 2.5-day Career Compass Success Seminar, we actually don't talk about cold calling very much, and we only touch on door knocking. Well, the reason for this is because door knocking and cold calling is such an institution in our industry that it would really be remiss of us not to at least address this subject a little bit. But we're not going to talk about your typical cold calling, we're not going to talk about your typical door knocking. We're actually going to create a situation where we take both those subjects, cold calling and door knocking, and put them together so they create even more leads, more business, and more synergy between the two of them because we've actually integrated them into each other. So let's go ahead and get started. For most of us, cold calling especially is something that we just don't want to do. We feel like hanging ourselves because it is hard. It is hard. And when you're cold calling, say, out of the phone book or just a random list or maybe a farm that you had gotten from your manager or a title company or an escrow company, it can be very challenging because a lot of times people answer the phone, they don't want to talk to you, you get hung up on a lot, and there's an old saying, they say, if your self-esteem is just a little too high in the morning, go ahead and do some cold calling and get it knocked down a little bit. Because I feel like getting hung up on. And of course that's a joke, but it's a lot, there's a lot of truth to that when you're thinking about cold calling because you do get hung up on a lot, and sometimes the people are a little bit rude. And the reason for that is because these days, if you have a phone number, which many of us have several phone numbers, you get called almost incessantly by people looking to sell you something or talk to you or take surveys, and it can be a little distracting. So a lot of times cold calling isn't really something that we want to do, but I will say cold calling is probably one of the best activities that you could do to really get yourself ready for the real estate industry, because if you can handle the rejection that you're going to be getting when you cold call, that you can probably handle rejection just about anywhere, and that really kind of, should we say, calluses you up for the industry. So it is a good activity to help you get ready for the outside world. However, what I would like to say is if you're going to cold call, to make it easy for you and to ease you into that activity, do this. Cold call from a list that isn't quite cold. And what I mean by that is many of the real estate trainers tell you to go and get your database and start there. And I agree. You should really start with the people that may know who you are. That way you probably won't get too many hang-ups, and it'll kind of ease you into actually calling people cold. So try that first if you're going to be doing this activity. So as you do cold calling, as it says here, you are going to be able to get a few people on the phone, you're going to be able to strike up a few conversations, but in a lot of cases, probably over 90% of the time, the calls that you're going to be making are going to create no results whatsoever. And what happens is a lot of real estate agents, what they do is they rationalize that 90% into the idea that cold calling doesn't work. And they say, well, listen, I called, 25 people today, and 24 of them wouldn't even talk to me, so obviously that's an activity that doesn't work. And there is some truth to that, but there is a lot of should we say, misnomer in that, because if you did get hold of one person and they did talk to you and that's a possible lead, well, that's one more lead than you had before. So if cold calling was something that we could just spend an hour on the phone and get 12 or 15 dozen or 15 great leads, and then follow up on those leads and convert half of them to deals, then we'd all be millionaires, and that would be great. So please don't rationalize yourself out of this activity just because 90% of the time you probably won't have a tremendous amount of result from those calls. So keep that in mind. Now, if you do door knocking if you do cold calling correctly, okay, it's going to enhance the other marketing activities you do, like door knocking, as I mentioned. So it's not entirely a waste of time if you do it that way. Here's what happens to a lot of realtors. They grab a farm, they grab a list, they grab a phone book, they start calling, they get really no results whatsoever, they don't combine it into their door knocking or into any of the other activities that they might have, and it really results in almost nothing. And I want you to make sure that you stay away from that. So the way we cold call is going to make as much difference as cold calling or not cold calling. Keep that in mind, please. Now, the first time we do cold calling, we must make sure that we have an objective for this activity. Now you're thinking, well, gee, no duh, Wellington, I know that. Yes, I know you know that, but it's amazing how many realtors will go ahead and cold call a list or a farm or again the phone book with no clear objective on why they're cold calling. So let's think about that for a second. Here's the objectives that we're gonna be having. Now, let me ask you a question. Is an objective more business? You might say, well, okay, kinda. And is the objective, more deals? Well, I'm gonna say no to both of those because here's what I want your objective to be. I want your objective to be simply to qualify leads and follow up. And you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, of course I would follow up with all the leads. Well, surveys show that many times when somebody has a qualified lead, they don't follow up. That's just the business. So I want your objective when you cold call to be one of these, to be this right here, is to qualify leads, and that's it. Just qualify leads. To say that I'm going to cold call to get more business or get more deals, that's like saying, well, I've got 4 tires here, so my objective is to drive down the road in my new car. And that really is kind of the end result versus what we're really working on right now. So simply, your objective is to qualify these leads, and that's really about it. Now, the next step in cold calling correctly is a specific area. Let me ask you a question. If you live in Southern California or Northern California or anywhere on the west coast of the United States, if you're calling Canada, is that a good cold calling strategy? Now, I'm being facetious here, but here's my point. What I want you to do is cold call in an area that we call at the Career Compass Seminar your hunting area. Now, what is a hunting area? Well, a lot of people call it a farming area. And let me ask you this, do you have a farming area? You'd probably say, yeah, I've got a farming area. And I would say, actually, you don't. You have a hunting area, and here's why. As realtors, we are not farmers. A farmer salesperson is someone who sits down at a mattress store, for example, and waits for customers to come through the door to them. That's a farmer salesperson. And some of those farmer salesmen are very, very good. But in real estate, we're hunters. We go out and find our prey, so to speak, do we not? So in your hunting area, and you should have a hunting area of about 5 square miles where you can actually say you are an expert in this area, the houses in this area, the clientele in this area, and everything about this area where you say, I am better versed and more informed on this particular area, my hunting area, than almost any other realtor. So what you want to do is you want to call in your hunting area. So you want to find the phone numbers if you're going to have a farm done, again, by your title company, your escrow company, or something like that. What you want to do is you want to go ahead and make sure you have a farm that's the area where you are an expert. And we're gonna show why that's important later on. Here's the thing. You're going to cold call the same area that you're going to follow up and door knock on later on. And why do we do this? Here's why. The more somebody hears your name, sees your picture, talks to you, the more familiar they're going to be with you. And, as they say, familiarity is the mother of business. Basically, the more familiar somebody is with you, the more familiar and more apt they are to use your services. They say that in a radio commercial, the commercial has to mention the name of the business at least 4 times just to have a chance of the average consumer remembering the name of the business or what they do. So the more times a possible customer sees your picture, hears your name, sees a sign by you, or anything else that's by you, the more apt that happens, the more apt they are to do business with you. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our cold calling and our door knocking kind of go together, and the reason for that is because we want that familiarity to be built up in your hunting area. Okay, here's what this is going to do for you. Very simply, here's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get ready to cold call. Now, many times people sit down at their desk and they've got the computer on and they've got the cell phone on, and or the home cell phone versus the phone they're going to use to cold call. And there's a TV in the other room, or there's people walking by their office or whatever. And there's huge distraction to this because if you're going to cold call, you're going to need to do 3 things. Here are the 3 things. First, a quiet place to cold call where you will not be interrupted. Second, concentrate. You're going to need to concentrate on who you're calling, what you're saying, what they're saying, and how to qualify these people. And the last one is communicate. So quiet, concentrate, communicate. Keep those 3 things in mind and go to an area where for 2 to 3 hours you're not going to be interrupted. It's going to be totally quiet, where you can concentrate on what you're doing so you can communicate with those possible customers at the highest level. Next. What about my script, Wellington? What are we going to do about my script? Well, As you know, if you've been to the Career Compass and read anything by the Career Compass, we are not big fans of scripts. And here's why. If you had a script for the conversation you're going to have with a friend at lunch, what is the chance that you're going to go to lunch with that friend and you're going to be able to follow the script? Very little. The problem with most scripts is within the first 2, 3, 4 sentences of a script, you're off on a tangent talking about something else, and thus the script really isn't very useful. So what we're going to suggest to you is not a script. If you're the kind of person that needs to go out and memorize verbatim each word of a script, it's probably not going to serve you that well, because life just isn't that way. Life doesn't follow scripts. There's a million different things that a client could say to you, and you're going to need to react to each of those. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to do what's called a skeleton script only. That's it. And what is a skeleton script? A skeleton script is basically just the main points about you, the industry, the things that you want to talk to the client about, and that's all. Just those things. And then from your own communicative ability, you are going to be able to fill things in based on what they say. That way you just kind of follow a skeleton script or bullet points when it comes to keeping the conversation on track, but all the rest of it, all the fluff, all the extra words and all the things you're going to get off on as far as tangents are going to be just out of your own personality. And if you find it difficult to speak to strangers, as we say, off the cuff, then maybe we should work on that first, because here's why. You must have the ability to converse with somebody without a script. This is a sales business, and if that is difficult for you, then you need to work on that way before you do anything else in this business. You need to have the gift of gab to be an effective realtor, because you're going to need to talk to people about a million different subjects when it comes to a million different houses and everything else, and you're going to need to be able to communicate with them without having to follow a script. So you must be able to educate from the cuff. And what does educate from the cuff mean? That means you need to be able to speak to a client off the cuff, just from your own personality, about just about anything that they might bring up. And we have a little here we go. Okay, not another telemarketer, okay? Okay, realtor mistake. Reading a script. And the thing about that is you don't want to get on there and read a script, because that's one of the most insultive things that I can think of, is when you get on the phone with somebody and you can tell they're reading a script. But before we get into that, what you need to do to ensure that you have the ability to educate from the cuff, do this little exercise. Find a colleague or a friend or a spouse or anybody that you know, and here's the exercise. They're going to give you a subject. It could be any subject under the sun. It does not have to be related to real estate. Any subject under the sun that they can think of. You know, ice cream in the summertime. You need to speak for 60 seconds straight about ice cream in the summertime, okay? Or zebras in Africa. Any subject that they can give you, you need to be able to speak from that just in a conversation style with that person. That's a really good exercise to know whether you are able to educate from the cuff. Let's get back to this now. One of the biggest mistakes the realtors make is reading a script. And here's why this is so bad. Okay? The reason it's so bad is because realtors read a script and they do all the talking. They do all the talking. There's an old saying, show me a salesperson that does all the talking and I'll show you a salesperson that's got a very, very low bank account. Because that really is the case. Because in sales, the less talking you do and the more listening you do, the more you know about your client, the more you're able to fit a product or service to your client, and the more apt you are to make a sale. And that really is sales. Sales is not talking. Okay? Sales, it really is listening. And that's the key. So you need to make sure that you can listen more than you talk. And this can be a real challenge, especially with cold calling, because we get a script in our hands and we read it. Have you ever been called by somebody who's reading a script? Boy, you don't really want to listen to them, do you? Exactly. All right, next thing. The objective, Converse like a real person. That is a challenge for so many real estate professionals, so many sales professionals, in my opinion. Okay? Here's your objective. Get the other person talking. And how are we going to do this? We're going to do this in a way that seems very, very nonchalant. We're going to ask them a general question. Here's a very general one that you can use on just about anybody to get them speaking. Hello, Mr. or Mrs. Jones. This is Wellington from ABC Real Estate. Are you familiar with ABC Real Estate? That's it. And then silence. They have to answer that question, so that gets them talking. They might be familiar, they might not, but either way, it doesn't matter what their answer is. You've got them talking, so now you've achieved your objective to make it a conversation and not just a monologue toward them through the phone. Next. You are never, ever, ever, ever going to use the term, how are you? Now, most people are like, well, wait a minute, don't I want to ask them how they are and be polite? Yes, you're going to be polite, but have you ever been called by a telemarketer? Here's our little picture. Oh no, not another telemarketer. Have you ever been called by a telemarketer that says, hi, Mr. or Mrs. Smith, how are you tonight? Don't you just feel like hanging up right there? Here's why. You don't know that person, they don't know you. So to ask them how they are seems a little insincere in my opinion. In fact, saying how are you is one of the biggest dead giveaways that I can think of, that the person on the other end of the line is a telemarketer. In fact, I play a little game because I do get called by telemarketers on a regular basis, and I like to listen to them just from an educational standpoint. But as soon as they say, how are you? I sometimes answer, I'm fine, telemarketer, how are you? You can't imagine the pause and the stop that creates, like, and then they just go right into their script, almost like they're not even listening. So never, ever, ever say, how are you? I remember listening to a show of a great talk show host named Tom Leykis, who I believe is out of Seattle. But anyway, people would call his show, and he doesn't know them, and they don't really know him other than listening to him on the radio. And they would say, how are you? And he'd say, do you care? And if the person says, yes, I care, then he'd say, I'm fine. Okay? But I think that's a great response to really show how sometimes insincere and silly it is to ask, how are you, or how's it going, or how are you today, or how are you this evening, is do you really care? Because you don't know that person and they don't know you. So most of the times, you probably don't care how they are really, and that's just reality. So please stay away from that term. And the reason I want to touch on that is because you are going to be very, should we say, apt to say that, because it's a real, should we say, attention filler. It's a time filler. You get on the phone, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. Well, that's good. Nice to talk to you. And all these real fluffy statements while you're getting your thoughts ready to say the next thing. And nobody wants to hear that. Just get on the phone and get to the point. Let's get to the next thing. Now, the next thing. Let's get down to business. One of the most appreciative things in surveys is somebody who calls somebody and gets right down to business, because we spend enough time on the phones as is. We already are on the phones almost all the time. So if you're going to be calling in a sales capacity, do a favor for the person that you're calling and get down to business and let them know why you're calling. So, hi Mr. Jones, this is Wellington from ABC Real Estate. By the way, are you familiar with ABC Real Estate? Is that the one down on 1st and Main, downtown? Yes, it is, sir. We are one of the oldest real estate offices in the area. By the way, Mr. Jones, the reason for my call, and then you start right into it. Forget the how are yous, anything else like that. Just get to the meat of the call, and that way they'll appreciate the fact that you're stating what you want in a quick, professional manner and not wasting their time, because their time is very valuable, same as yours. Okay. What we're going to do is how are you, Mr. Jones? Okay, this is Wellington from ABC Real Estate. The reason for my call is to ask you what we call the attention-getting question. Now, here's the attention-getting question. First off, let's go over it. First, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, yes, this is Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Great, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, this is Wellington from ABC Real Estate. Are you familiar with ABC Real Estate? Yeah, they're down on 1st and Main. Exactly, sir. We're one of the oldest real estate brokerages in town, and we're very trusted. And we have some of the best real estate agents, trainers, managers, and everything else like that. By the way, the reason for my call is, I'm not sure if you knew this, but inventory levels on homes for sale right now is at an all-time low. And houses that are on the market and priced correctly are getting multiple offers within the first few days of being listed. Let me ask you a question, Mr. Jones. Do you have any interest in selling your home? There you go. There's the interest, attention-getting question right there. And most people, if they own a home, if you ask them that question, that's going to elicit a response, for sure. Let's go over that again, excuse me. Inventory levels on homes for sale is at an all-time low. Most homes that are priced correctly are getting multiple offers within the first couple days of being listed. Mr. Jones, do you have any interest in selling your home? Then silence. and wait for the response. So not only have you got them talking, but you got right to the meat of the conversation, and you've asked them a question that in most cases, 99% of the time, if they own a home, they will comment on that question. Either you'll get three things: yes, no, or I rent. So let's go over these, shall we? And by the way, the thing you want to say is, and by the way, Mr. Jones, if you are not interested in selling your home, and the reason being is because you might be underwater or owe more on your house than the more owe more on your house than it's worth in the open market, or if you're behind in your mortgage in some way, we have programs to help you sell your house with no money out of your pocket, and the bank takes care of everything. So you've probably heard of something called a short sale, and we can talk about that too. So what you're doing there is you're asking them a question that's really going to get a response. Then you're also maybe preempting a little bit, maybe an objection that they might have. But let's get into this. This does several things for you. The first thing this does is, if you get right to the meat of the conversation, the client appreciates your honesty, which is very rare. And as you know, this is very rare, because a lot of times people get on the phone and, how are you tonight? And they go into this big sales pitch. Don't do that. Get right to the meat of the question. Okay? You speed up your cold calling, because people just say, I have no interest in selling my home, thank you very much, and hang up. That's not a bad thing. Here's why. They just saved you a bunch of time. And the reason they saved you a bunch of time is now you can get on to the next person. They say every time you get 5 no's, you're about to get a yes. So the less time you spend on the no's, the more time you can spend on the yeses, and that's what you want to do. So don't be afraid of people saying, no, I have no interest in selling my house, have a nice day, and hang up on you. That's great. They just saved you a bunch of time, and now you can get to somebody who does want to sell their house with you. Second, or third, never be afraid of what you do in your career. You're like, well, wait a minute, Wellington, what do you mean by that? Many times people are actually afraid of the fact that they are salespeople. They think it's some kind of nefarious, cloak and dagger, shadowy type of profession, and it's not. It's a great profession. It's the greatest profession. Until somebody sells something, the economy never moves. So what you do is very, very needed, and it's an excellent profession to be in, so don't be afraid of that. I remember one time I walked into a shoe store years ago, and I was not planning on buying shoes at all. And this young, enthusiastic shoe salesman comes up to me and says, hello, sir, thank you for coming into XYZ Shoes. I would love to sell you a new pair of shoes today. And I was really taken aback by him saying that, because I know he's trying to sell me shoes, and he knows he's trying to sell me shoes, but the fact that he would say it so blatantly completely disarmed me, and the honesty to that was, again, so disarming that I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to buy some shoes today, and I end up buying some shoes. So don't ever be afraid of saying, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I would love to sell your house for you. I would love to help you buy a house. Go ahead and say so. Never be afraid of what you do for a living, because what you do is the most needed thing in our economy. All right, next. Call them with a mindset that you are their home sales consultant. Everybody wants to sell their home. That is a fact. At the right price. There's almost nobody out in our society that wouldn't sell their home if the price and terms were correct. Keep that in mind. So if everybody out there wants to sell their home at the right price and the right terms, simply you are the consultant that's going to help them achieve that goal. So don't go into it with the mindset that, oh my gosh, I hope they want to sell my house with me. They do want to sell their house with you. And you're simply the consultant that's going to make those terms and that price the right thing. Okay, now after the question, we handle any feedback that we're going to be getting. And by the way, feedback is some of the best things you could ever hear. Why? Because someone who's not interested at all will not ask you any questions. So questions are your best friend. In my sales career, I welcome questions entirely, because a question simply is nothing more. It's not an objection of you and your product. A question is just a desire for more information so they can make the right choice and buy from you. So that's really what it is. So welcome these questions. So when you get feedback, handle that feedback to see if there's any opportunity. So here's how we do that. Here's our three things that could happen when we call somebody and make this statement. Yes, I would like to sell my house. Okay? That's the best one you can get. And again, this is not going to be the majority. This is going to be the massive minority when calling people. If you call 100 people and you get 2 or 3 that want to sell your house, you're doing great. So keep that in mind. So when you get a yes, basically you go through your qualifying process. We're not going to get into that today because you should already know what you're qualifying, how to qualify a prospect. That should be something that is in the back of your head that you could say when you're asleep. And if it's not, please practice that. Have your manager or another colleague in your office help you practice the qualifying questions to get somebody ready. Okay? Now, qualify the prospect and set the appointment. Done. You're going to qualify the prospect, get the appointment set. You're going to follow to make sure the appointment is still happening, and you're going to go and do it. That's it. That's the best thing that can happen. No, I am not interested in selling my house. Now, make sure that there's no opportunity. A no is not necessarily a no. A no is, I don't want to sell my house right now under the assumptions that I have. And that is where you're going to, should we say, address their concerns. So, when they say no, you might say, well, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I understand. As I mentioned before, just in case, okay? Just in case you are not interested in selling because your home may be underwater or not enough equity to sell the home, without bringing a check to close, we have programs for that. So they're saying no, but they might be saying no because their house is underwater and they don't think they can sell their house. And there is where you become the consultant to show them that they really can. So again, you want to make sure you get that objection out of the way if that happens to be their objection. So you want to mention that. And if you have ever heard of something called a short sale, we could also talk about that. What is a short sale? A short sale is where we negotiate with the bank to sell your home for less than what you owe on it. And that way you get out from underneath your home. The bank actually is able to sell the home and both people win. So if you don't know what a short sale is, we need to have a short sale class for you. So you want to address that one as well. And you might have to explain what a short sale is and how it benefits both parties. And really, short sales are for people that have mortgages that they can no longer afford. That's a whole other subject. Okay, so let's keep going. And the last thing you're going to get a yes, a no, or a no, I don't own this home, I rent. Is that an opportunity? You bet it is, because let me ask you a question. Is right now the best time in the world to buy a house? Absolutely. In fact, I believe it was Realtor Magazine just last year said right now, in 2012, it is the best time in the history of our country to purchase a new home. Wow. Talk about an opportunity. So if they say, no, I don't own a home, I rent, fantastic, Mr. Jones. Tell you what, before I get off the phone, you have probably heard from many people that right now is the best time to purchase a new home. Would exploring the idea of buying a new home be of interest to you? Then you're back to yes or no again. So there you go. There's our three reactions that we're going to get when we get on the phone. Make sure we're talking to the right person. We don't say, how are you? Okay? We ask them a very general question to get it into a conversational style. And then we hit them with the meat of the reason for my call is, and we already went over that. Okay? So basically the reason for my call, Mr. Jones, is, you may not know this, but right now, inventory levels on homes for sale is at an all-time low. Houses that are priced correctly are getting multiple offers within the first couple days of being listed. Do you have any interest in selling your home right now? And then we go into this. That's really it. All right, let's keep going. So, here's our attention-getting statement. We just went over that. So you're going to get three reactions to that. The first one is going to be yes, and what do? We qualify and set the appointment, and we're done. Next, you're going to get a no. No, I'm not interested in selling my home. And then we ask our qualifying questions to make sure there's not an opportunity here. Well, sir, if you're not interested in selling your home because you might be underwater and owe more on your home than the home is worth on the open market, then we have programs to help you get out of your house with no money out of your pocket. Would you be interested in hearing a little bit more about that? Or, no, I rent. And then what are we going to do? We're going to use our best time in the world to buy a house statement. So there's your options right there. And we're going to combine this with our door knocking. And we're going to go over that next.